You are listening to the Embrace the Mud podcast, where we discuss all things related to healthy, joyful, and life giving relationships. Why focus on relationships? Because the quality of our intimate partnerships and close connections influences our health, happiness, and longevity more than anything else in our lives. Relationships matter a lot. So, together, let's jump into the mud, aka our messy relationships, pull some weeds, plant some seeds, and create an enriching environment where strong relationships can take root. I am your grateful host, Dara Posner. I am a recovering relational disaster working toward relational mastery. I am a certified positive psychology coach and relationship mindset coach at Mud Coaching. I work with teens and adults from all over the world, and I am ecstatic to get to talk to you about the one thing that lights my fire more than anything else in life, and that is learning how to create healthy, joyful, life giving relationships that we all desire to have. So let's dive in. Welcome to episode number 1 on the Embrace the Mud podcast. I cannot believe that I am here and that I'm doing this. This has been something I have been planning for and dreaming about for quite a while. And we're here. I'm grateful. And today's very first episode, what I would like to do is basically give you the rundown on what this podcast is all about and why you should listen to it faithfully. I'm going to do that by answering 3 questions, starting with, why did I start this podcast? Who is this podcast for? And lastly, what am I going to be talking about in the hopefully many, many future episodes to come? All right, so diving right in, starting with why. Above all, I would say I started this podcast because I love love. I'm obsessed with it, plain and simple. I've spent most of my life looking for the love of a lifetime. And tragically, I have also spent most of my life sucking quite badly at love and relationships. So, the thing that I have dreamed of and wanted the most, I have also struggled to attain the most. And while I have come a long way, I continue to work toward mastery in this area. I consider myself a recovering relational disaster working toward relational mastery. After nearly a decade of learning and growing in the area of relationships, I find myself happily married to an incredible man whom I adore more than words can ever express. So I can say that my dream has come true. We have been together for 7 years and married just this year in April. And unlike 15, 10, or even 5 years ago, I can actually enjoy being in a relationship now. I'm able to experience harmony, peace, and a sense of ease. I can have fun and have a mostly good time in partnership. I can relax in and feel safe and know that I am loved and valued. And I'm very grateful for that because that is not how I have experienced relationships in the past. And that brings me to my second reason for why I started this podcast. I am aware that there are a lot of people hurting deeply in relationships. There is a lot of relational pain in our world. I know this because I coach many people who are suffering relationally, and because I myself struggled for decades in painful relationships. I've also witnessed the relational struggles of many of my peers over the years. So, as a fellow struggler and overcomer, I want to help more people find their way to breaking through and out of the patterns that they are stuck in. Yes, I am a coach and I help people in this area and in other areas of life. But in this podcast, I'm really speaking from the perspective of someone who has lived the experience of wanting emotional intimacy and connection, wanting a healthy attachment between myself and another person, and who has struggled immensely, sometimes brutally, to achieve that, but who has in the end found her way. So, who is this podcast for? The way that I imagine it on this podcast, I am speaking to people like me, good people who are stuck in bad behavioral patterns in their partnerships. For about 20 years of my life, nearly 2 whole decades, I fumbled and stumbled in and out of dysfunctional romantic relationships. It took so long and many hours of therapy, lots of self reflection and inner work, reading books and articles and listening to podcasts to learn about all the things that I didn't know about relationships and relating. Most of what I quote unquote knew about relationships before that, I learned from observing dysfunctional relationships and from romantic comedies. And I mean, like, what could go wrong? And now I know not everyone can relate. And if that's you, bless you. I am so happy that this has not been your experience. And by the way, you can still get a lot out of this podcast because overall, it's about what great relationships look like, what it takes to create them, and how to overcome the many different things that can stand in the way. And we all have things that we can learn and improve upon in order to better our ability to relate to others. Some of us just have a different starting point than others do. And there is a big group of you out there who are good, sweet, tender-hearted people who want to love well and be loved well, and who, like I have, are really, really struggling to do that. And you feel ashamed and embarrassed and sometimes completely hopeless. Relationships tend to bring out the worst in some of you, and you worry that you're doomed to live in these dysfunctional relationship dynamics forever. There was a time in my life where I thought, you know what? I'm just done. I'm going to be single for the rest of my life. Like, this is too much. It is too hard. It hurts too much, and I am not doing it anymore. But obviously, that changed, and I'm really glad it did. I'm glad that I did not give up on love and connection, that I somehow realized I had to learn to love and also to be loved because I really didn't know how. And now I get to experience and benefit from real intimacy and closeness, and I want to help you experience and benefit from that too. For those of you who are in hard relationships where maybe you both act out and then you regret it and you apologize to each other, and then before you know it, you're doing it all again and you're feeling ashamed and stuck in your painful patterns, listen up. Even though your relationship feels heavy, maybe even toxic, and you're wondering if things can ever really change or if you're just doomed to a lifetime of dysfunction and pain, I want to tell you that there is hope. Or maybe you're someone who has been married before, perhaps multiple times, and you keep finding yourself reliving the same relationship over and over, and you're ready to give up. Or you're somebody who never really feels quite satisfied or confident that they're with the right person or that they're in the right relationship. And you're always sort of fighting this confusion about your relationships, and you're unable to really settle in, kind of like keeping one foot in and one foot out, unable to fully give your heart. And you haven't realized that you need to intentionally learn to be relational and how to be relational. This is something most of us are not taught, but really, really need to be. So that brings me to my final question that I want to answer for you, which is what will I be talking about in future episodes? Some of the time, I will be sharing my relational recovery story. I am a childhood trauma survivor. I grew up in a dysfunctional family and home. I'm currently estranged from most of my immediate family members. So I'll be sharing my story and my journey from major dysfunction to learning and healing, growing and connecting. And I want to share my story because I believe most of you, or at least many of you, will be able to relate and feel less alone, and most importantly, find hope. But mostly, I want to talk about the things I've learned and done to create change in myself and my relational life. And I want to pass them on to you because one thing you should know about me is that I am an insatiable learner. I am learning and acquiring knowledge nonstop. It might actually be a little compulsive, I don't know, but I am obsessed with learning all there is to know about doing relationships well and creating safe and intimate bonds because they are just so important to well-being and happiness. And my gift is to be able to take like complex ideas and findings and share them in a way that is clear and easy to understand and use. At least that's what I've been told. But the point really is that what I have learned in this last decade has drastically changed me, my relationships, and my life. So, the last thing I want to do in a world full of people suffering relationally is to keep all of that to myself. I need to share it. I want to share it. And I hope that what I share helps you transform your relational experience and, by extension, your health and quality of life the way that it has transformed mine. Okay, so some of the actual topics and things I will be talking about in future episodes are childhood trauma and CPTSD recovery, self esteem and its impact on relationships, self healing and personal growth, codependency, as most people know it, though I prefer the term ineffective dependency. I want to share essential relational skills. I want to talk about some of the relational concepts that are lesser known that I found immensely helpful in my recovery. I am definitely going to be talking about my favorite relationship experts, the people I have learned from, the people who have like saved my life. Maybe I'll even be lucky enough to interview some of them one day. Who knows? I want to talk about compatibility, the building blocks of secure relationships, emotional needs, how to tell if you're settling or if you've got a good thing going, dealing with substance abuse in relationships, infidelity. I really want to talk about age gap relationships because my husband and I have a pretty significant age gap in which I am the older partner. I want to talk about what it means to be a good partner. I plan to interview other recovering relational disasters. I think that hearing other people's stories is so, so powerful. We'll get into attachment styles, heartbreak, emotional intelligence, healthy communication, habits that destroy relationships, essential habits for building and restoring broken relationships, sexual intimacy, and so much more, you guys. I have got so much to say, if you can't tell, and to share after all these years of being primarily focused on transforming my relational life. And I also want you to tell me what you want me to talk about. So please get in touch. Tell me, what are you experiencing? What has got you feeling stuck in the mud? What are you learning? And who are you learning from that the rest of us need to know about? What is some wisdom that you have to share? Let's make this conversation a two-way street. Okay, so that pretty much sums up what this podcast is all about. One final thing I think is important to clarify is that when I say relational disaster, it's not meant as a slight or criticism in any way. I actually got the term from Dr. John Gottman, one of the top experts in the field of marriage counseling and therapy, along with his wife, Julie Gottman. In his observation of couples in his Love Lab, where they study how couples interact with each other during calm and mundane times and also during conflict, he began to distinguish the couples he called disasters based on the behaviors and habits they demonstrated that led them down the path of relational destruction from the couples he called masters, who he observed had interactions marked by attitudes and behaviors that fostered safety and security between them and that kept their relationship strong and ultimately intact for the long term. So when I started studying the Gottman's work and reading all of their books and watching all of the videos, I could clearly see that I was 100% in that disaster category based on how I was interacting and reacting in my relationship at the time. And so that was my starting point. Total relational disaster. And that journey started 9 years ago in 2013. And I'm still on it, still in recovery. I still fall back into old patterns and behaviors sometimes. It is not an overnight transformation, that I can tell you. And again, not all of us will have the same starting point. So my journey is unique, just like yours. So, okay, now that I've addressed that and have given you a pretty good idea, I hope, about what the Embrace the Mud podcast is all about, I think it's time to wrap things up. At the core, this is an invitation to come out of the shadows, you who are struggling hard in your relationships, and to embrace the hardship and struggle that you're in as an opportunity for change and growth and healing. You hide because you think you are alone, but the truth is, you are not as abnormal as you think. I'll talk more about that in a future episode. But the bottom line is, most of us are suffering in our relationships, and most of us are hiding it. I say, let's not hide anymore. I want to talk about it. Will you join me? I hope you will. Okay, you guys, that's all I have for today. I hope to see you back here next week on the Embrace the Mud podcast. In the meantime, please remember you are wired for love and connection. You are worthy of love and connection, and you are capable of love and connection.